All praise to the Most High, Ahaya, and to his son, Yeshua, the Messiah. Hallelujah. This is Brother Holly here with the first Spirit of Truth broadcast here on the AHAYAH'S channel, as well as the House of Ahaya channel on this set apart Shabbat day. First and foremost, peace, peace, peace unto you on the Shabbat. Peace I say in the name of Yeshua the Messiah. Hallelujah. And also on this particular Sabbath, I say unto you, happy the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. Ahaya has sent forth his son, and he shall be called Emmanuel, which means Ahaya with us. He sent forth his son to dwell amongst us, and we are happy he came to seek and save those who were lost. All praises. Now, as it being the first day of Tabernacles, I'm encouraging you to hang your palm fronds from your doors and to spend the time for the next 8 days, to spend the time remembering that Ahaya sent forth his son to tabernacle, to be amongst us, and we are going to be brought back into the land where we will always be in complete utter community and complete utter communion with our Father. Ahaya has already said, he's gonna come and tabernacle amongst us, and he will be our Elohim, and we will be his people. All praises. We have a bright future where tabernacle will go on forever. So let us remember that. Let us celebrate that. Let us commune with Ahaya and with his son Yeshua during this sacred feast time found in his word and in the truth. Hallelujah. Now, we're going to begin a new series this Shabbat. It's kind of unusual series. And I say it's unusual because normally I don't dig this deep, but something is beginning to bother me. And I made mention of it a few weeks ago that I'm starting to find things in the Gospel of John that cannot be substantiated anywhere else. That the rule or law of 2 or 3 witnesses needing to be found to establish a word cannot be found to establish many things found in the Gospel of John, i.e. the marriage supper of Cana. Anybody else got a witness of that event? The secret conversation between Yeshua and Nicodemus, found in John chapter 3. Can anybody show me where anybody else, Matthew, Mark, or Luke, anybody talked about that conversation and the points brought up in it? You won't find it. And the Gospel of John has also, I just call them what they are, problems. Problems with the timing of things. Problem with how the story goes. It tells stories that are completely foreign to the other 3 Gospels, i.e. who came to the tomb on the first day of the week after the Shabbat. Who showed up? In the other 3 Gospels, there was a team of people, but in John's Gospel, it was one. And in John's Gospel alone was this one person sent. And in John's Gospel alone did the disciples run to the tomb. In the other Gospels, it talks about a team of people going to the disciples. And in Mark's Gospel, the disciples didn't move a finger. They just thought they were making stuff up. So, but the difference or I should say the slight differences of how the story is told in Matthew, Mark, and Luke do have enough similarities that they harmonize. John's gospel doesn't harmonize with anything. It is the same way if someone heard about these things hundreds of years after the events, didn't have access to the other gospels or to the Torah for that matter to validate itself, and then just wrote a story from what they heard. And John's gospel introduces concepts that are not found anywhere except within it, like the Logos becoming flesh and dwelling among us. It just and some of these concepts, like the Father being a spirit, and it talks about in John chapter 3, a spirit is like the wind. It just comes and goes. It's nebulous, and then it says the Father is like that. I mean, make up your mind. But we can read in other places where the Father had a body, a face, a hand, a backside. In Exodus 33, we talked about it last week. And the Father has a body. That AHAYAH has a face. AHAYAH has a hand. He's sitting on his throne till his enemy be made his footstool. So he got feet. And the Apostle Paul, in whom we all trust, said there's a natural body and then there's a spiritual body. It's a body. But not according to John's gospel. He's just spirit. He's like the wind. So, not only in this series, I hope and pray with AHAYAH'S help and through his kind permission, by the help of his spirit and through his kind permission, we will not only point out these inconsistencies, but others. And we're going to start with when was Messiah crucified? It seems kind of obvious. According to the other Gospels, he was crucified on the day of Passover. And when I say the day of Passover and all days, as you know, biblically start at the evening and end the following evening. It's a 24-hour cycle from sundown to sundown. That's a day. And we'll see from the book of Leviticus that when it talks about the Day of Atonement in particular, it makes that point. It makes that reference completely clear that it's from even to even. So, and we can use that description of the Day of Atonement being from even to even to further examine and express how time, a day, is found in the scriptures to be. For if the Day of Atonement is from even to even, then every day is from even to even. The Sabbath is from even to even. Every day is from evening to evening. And in the book of Matthew in particular, it talks about the day the Messiah was crucified. He ate the Passover. Passover started at evening. He ate the Passover with his disciples, held the cup up. This is the cup of the new covenant in my blood for the remission of sin. Said all that. Said all that in Luke. Said all that in Matthew. Said all that in Mark. Didn't mention a word about the new covenant in John. Maybe the writer of John's gospel, whoever he or they might be, and as we go further in the study, we'll look at was it John? Was it somebody, a singular person, or was it a group of people? It kind of alludes to there was a committee of people. But that's for a later teaching, hopefully with AHAYAH'S permission and his kind assistance. But I did mention a few weeks ago, children, that I started seeing inconsistencies with the Gospel of John, especially when we compare it to how are we to know what is or is not an established word. You gotta have multiple witnesses for a word to be established. Every word is established the same way out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. Not John's Gospel. It stands alone. No one heard except the writer of John heard John the Baptist say, "Behold, the Lamb of Ahiah that takes away the sin of the world." That sounds so good to a Constantine Christian's ear. That sounds just as good as John 3:16 does. Now, you don't see Matthew chapter 15, verse 24 as a bumper sticker. I believe it's 24, 23. Where he said, "I'm not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Yasharel." Let's just read it. Yes, Matthew chapter 15, verse 24. You won't see this as a bumper sticker. But he answered and said, "I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Yasharel." You won't see that. Here's the words of the Messiah. You won't see that as a bumper sticker. But you'll see John 3:16 as a bumper sticker. John 3:16 hanging in the end zone of football games. Why? Well, the answer is quite obvious. John's gospel seemingly is inclusive, where Matthew, Mark, and Luke are exclusive. John's gospel is for dispensationalists, where Matthew, Mark, and Luke's gospel are for people who believe in the covenants. For it makes mention of the blood of the new covenant in each. And in Mark's gospel, it says the blood of the New Testament, which does two things. It gives us a definition that the word testament and covenant can be used interchangeably or synonymous. And it makes 2 Corinthians chapter 4, where it's talking about we're being made able ministers of the New Testament, not just talking about the epistles or from Acts through Jude as being the New Testament, as some dispensationalists believe it is. They call it the church era. But it lets you know that we've been made able ministers of the new covenant, which spans from Jeremiah through until the everlasting covenant be established, which is talked about in Jeremiah as well. And we know from the scriptures that the new covenant is only made with the house of Yasharel and with the house of Judah. It's not made with the other nations. They have no new covenant. They have no old covenant. They have no covenant at all. But we know from Romans chapter 9 that the covenants only apply or pertain to Yasharel. They don't pertain to other nations. So, if I was a member of these other nations, I too would look to John's gospel to find solace and inclusion. But we're going to show that John's gospel, maybe it shouldn't even been written. Maybe it wasn't written until much, much later by other people trying to impersonate and find a way into our covenant. So, we're going to be reading from the AHAYAH'S scriptures. And if you don't have a copy, I've said this before, I'll say it again. If you don't have a copy of the AHAYAH'S scriptures, please, please, please go out and purchase you one. Two reasons. One, it's a clean read. They've gotten rid of all the pagan deities' names. Scratch right through them. They scratch through ISRAEL and translate it as it should be, Yasharal. And they bring out, and I find it amusing how they do it in the scriptures. They bring out that the name Barabbas means Jesus. Barabbas is a Greek meaning of son of the Father, the same as Jesus means that in Latin. So when it talks about give us Barabbas, they were really saying give us Jesus. And crucify Yasha and give us Jesus. But that's a whole nother teaching. I just find that hilarious. How this particular book of scriptures points that out. It's the same no matter what book of scriptures you read. Barabbas means son of the Father in Greek in every version. King James, whatever version you read, Sefer, whatever version, it means the same thing. But only in the AHAYAH'S scriptures does it point that out as being the same as Yeshua's meaning in Latin, which means Son of the Father or Barabbas. Yasha means salvation or deliverance or redemption. He was named for what his purpose was. And this Barabbas, this thief, wow, you talk about identity. Like I said, a whole new teaching. That's a whole new teaching. And we're going to get into it. I find it amusing and enlightening at the same time. So forgive me for treating it in a light fashion. It's not a light subject at all. But as I said just a moment ago, I find it both intriguing, enlightening, as well as comical. You can't make this stuff up, children. You really can't. And brother, I'm just having a good time with you. So let's proceed with our prosecution, if you will. We're going to prosecute a case. Because the scriptures tell us what, children? Prove all things and hold fast that which is good. So let's prove if the Gospel of John is in fact valid. Let's prove if it's legitimate. Let's prove if it's authentic. Let's prove it. How are we going to prove it? By comparing spiritual things to spiritual things. By looking at 2 or 3 witnesses of the same event being defined and see if they agree. Or if they doing this number. If they're doing this, we got an issue. Then we got an issue. So let's see. The day in which Messiah was crucified. Let's go, before we go to John's Gospel, let's go to the book of Leviticus. And we're going to Leviticus 23, and we're going to look at the feast day of Passover and the feast of unleavened bread, and we're going to look at the feast of Day of Atonement to define how the scriptures look at a day. What is a day? It's all in Leviticus 23. I'll be brief. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 1. And AHAYAH spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Yasharah, and saying to them, Concerning the feast of AHAYAH, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. So he's defining, unequivocally, for his children, what are his feasts. And let me help you. You can read this until Messiah return. You won't see Christmas and Easter in here. You just won't. So you Constantine Christians, I don't know what you're keeping. I really don't. I saw a commercial on TV today about some cursed Christmas tree. I couldn't believe it. Now they got this Christmas tree. It's like a pop-up tent. I kid you not. I just cracked up inside. They just heathens. Heathens all. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 4. These are the feasts of AHAYAH, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. In the 14th day of the first month at even, or evening, is AHAYAH'S Passover. We highlight that. So the Passover begins when? At evening, according to the scriptures, according to the Torah, according to what AHAYAH told Moses to tell us, the children of Jacob. Verse 6, and on the 15th day, that's the 14th day, is Passover. On the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto AHAYAH. 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. In the first day ye shall have a holy convocation. When you highlight that, a holy convocation should be like a set apart day, a Sabbath. Ye shall do no servile work therein. See, there it is. It's a day of rest from servile work. So if you got a job, you doing something for somebody, you don't do it on the first day of unleavened bread. Now, it didn't say that Passover was a Sabbath. It didn't say that Passover was a Sabbath at all. Will you highlight that too? Just make a mental note of that. Passover is not a Sabbath. The first day, which is the day after Passover, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is. That will be key to remember when we look at these events, Passover and the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread from the Gospel of John. We got to read it here first so you will understand what was already written. You'll seemingly have a better education on these things than whoever wrote John's Gospel. He had it all mixed up, or they had it all mixed up. And we're going to go down a little bit here in the book of Leviticus, and we're going to read about the Day of Atonement, and we're going to see that a day goes from even to even. Let's read that. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 27. And on the 10th day of the 7th month, there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be a holy convocation unto you, and you shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire unto AHAYAH. And ye shall do no work in the same day, for it is a day of atonement, to make an atonement for you before AHAYAH your Elohim. When you highlight day, it just says day after. It says day multiple times. This is a day. Day of atonement. Verse 29, and whatsoever soul it be that shall not be afflicted in the same day, he shall be cut off from among his people. And whosoever soul it be that doeth any work in that same day, the same soul I will destroy from among his people. Ye shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. So it's good for us right in here, right now. If you're a watcher or a follower of these channels, if you're a member of the House of AHAYAH'S house, we kept the Day of Atonement 10 days ago. Why? How did I know it was 10 days ago? Because it's 10 days after is the beginning of the Feast of Tabernacles, which we're beginning today. All praises. Leviticus 23:32, it shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest. Ye shall afflict your souls in the ninth day of the month at even. From even unto evening you shall celebrate your Sabbath. Will you highlight that? The Day of Atonement begins when? At evening time. When does it end? When does your day, the Day of Atonement, end? The following evening. I'll read it again. 32. And it shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest, and ye shall afflict your souls in the ninth day of the month at even. And from even unto evening shall you celebrate your Sabbath. So the evening of the ninth day to the evening of the 10th day. So the Day of Atonement is the 10th day. So at even of the ninth day to the evening of the 10th day is the Day of Atonement. The day starts at evening, biblically, for feast, for Sabbaths. The day starts at evening for feasts and for Sabbaths, according to the scriptures. Now, let's go to the book of John. Before we go to John, let's get it straight from Matthew. Matthew had it right. Yeah, we should read it right first. Let's go to Matthew chapter 26. We're going to go to John in a moment. But let's look at it from Matthew's gospel. Matthew chapter 26, let's start reading at verse 1. And it came to pass when Yahshua had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples, you know that after 2 days is the feast of Passover, and the Son of Adam is betrayed to be crucified. Then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people into the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and consulted that they might take Yahshua by subtlety and kill him. Now let's skip down to verse 17. Remember, Yahshua said it's 2 days to Passover. Now let's skip down to verse 17, Matthew 26. Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread. Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread. That's the day after Passover, right? We just read that from Leviticus. Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Yahshua, saying unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover? So the first day of the feast of unleavened bread is what? The Passover. It's talked about in the book of Leviticus as separate times, but they run consistently together. You can look at them as being one big feast. The first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is the Passover, which is not a Sabbath. The day following Passover is a Sabbath, according to what we just read in the book of Leviticus. I told you, pay attention how the days fall out. And I also told you to pay attention how days are counted from evening to evening for feasts and Sabbaths. So let's read again. Matthew 26:17. Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Yahshua, saying unto him, Where will you that we prepare for you to eat the Passover? And he said, Go into the city to such a man, and say unto him, Master saith, My time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples. Will you highlight this? Because nowhere in John's gospel they talk about the Messiah keeping Passover with the disciple before he died. Not a mention of it. And now some of you are going ahead and start reading John. You just start flipping like, what? You over there looking for Passover. It ain't there. Well, I digress. I digress. It talks about it, but it don't say that he ate nothing. And this is Matthew 26:19. And the disciples did as Yahshua had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. Will you please highlight that? They made ready the Passover. He ate the Passover with his disciples. It's not just found that he ate the Passover with his disciples in Matthew's gospel. It's found in Mark's gospel and in Luke's. It just isn't in John's. We don't have any witness in John of it. John is, whoever wrote John, completely oblivious that the Most High ate Passover before he was crucified. Oblivious. At least by lack of mention. Everybody else thought it was significant. And supposedly John was there at the Passover. Why wouldn't he talk about it? Anyway, I digress. Again, I digress. Now when the evening was come, he sat down with the 12. When did Passover begin? At evening. They went to prepare it. But when the evening come, they sat down to do what? He sat down with the 12, and when they did eat, he said, Verily I say unto you that one of you shall betray me. So what are they eating? They're eating the Passover. They were preparing the Passover, now they're eating the Passover. The Passover is a meal. The Passover starts at evening time. If you eat the Passover while the sun's still up, you ain't doing it right, baby. You ain't keeping the feast right. I'm just here to help. Wait the sun down to eat your roasted lamb, your bitter herbs, your unleavened bread. Wait the sun down to stand with your staff in your hand, shoes on your feet, coat on your back, and you eat it fast in a hurry with your whole family. Ready to go. That's how you keep Passover, children. What you eat at Passover is written. How you dress at Passover is written. How you think about it is written. It's the meal of haste. Ready to go. So when we read it here, they were keeping it right. They waited till evening. Just like the scriptures say. Let's continue reading. And as they did eat, he said, Verily I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and began every one of them to say to him, Master, is it I? And he answered and said, He that dips his hand with me in this dish, the same shall betray me. The son of Adam goeth as it is written of him, but woe unto that man by whom the son of Adam is betrayed. It has been good for that man that he had not been born. Then Judas, which betrayed him, answered and said, Master, it is I. And he said unto him, You have said. And as they were eating, Yahshua took bread and blessed it and brake it and gave it to his disciples and said, Take, eat, this is my body. Now, we all know this story, right? We repeat this one over and over and over again. You just can't repeat it from John. John's gospel is emptied of any reference to the covenants. Emptied. But let's read a reference to the new covenant right here in Matthew's gospel. I'll read verse 26 again. It's Matthew 26:26. And when they were eating, Yahshua took bread, it was unleavened, right? And blessed it and braked it and gave it to his disciples and said, Take, eat, this is my body. And because it was Passover, we know the bread was unleavened. So if you were celebrating Passover and eating leavened bread, you're just showing either that you don't care what the scriptures say or you don't know what the scriptures say. One of those two. And when I was amongst those tithe-taking, pork-chop-eating, Sunday-go meeting people, they had communion once a month, and always they gave out primarily, I should say, leavened bread. Now, they did provide those little white cookie-looking pieces of bread. They put those underneath the little napkin that had on the little gold-plated tray that had the loaf of bread where people break a piece. Yeah, and Brother Holly, I'm a stickler. I always took a little piece from underneath there. I never took any of that. To my recollection, I never took any of that leavened bread during the communion. I always took that little piece of unleavened bread. It was always under there. I took a piece of that and ate that. Why? Because the scriptures call for that. No other reason. They had a tradition that departed from the word. No wonder I left them, folks. No wonder I left. And I suggest to you to come out from among them and be ye separate too. Leave them. If they want to adhere to the scriptures, leave them. And you can find you a place of fellowship and worship here amongst us here at AHAYAH'S house. We are a stickler for what saith the scriptures. All praises. Back to the scriptures. Matthew 26:26 again. And as they were eating, Yahshua took bread and blessed it and braked it and gave it to his disciples and said, Take, eat, this is my body. And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, Drink ye all of it, for this is the blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. We talk about this all the time here at AHAYAH'S house and House of High. Yahshua's blood was the blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many, not any. For what purpose? The remission of sins. There's a covenant that Paul makes mention of in Romans chapter 9. Oh, I'm sorry, chapter 11, where the Most High said he's going to take away Jacob's sins. He said he's going to take away everybody's sin. No, that's John's gospel. It talks about the world's sin being taken away. What did Paul say? Romans chapter 11. There's a covenant to take away sin from Jacob. Let's read that. Because this new covenant is to take away the sins of the children of Jacob. Why? How do we know that? Because in the book of Hebrews chapter 8, it says the new covenant is established between AHAYAH and the house of Yasharal, the 10 northern kingdom tribes, and the house of Judah, the 2 southern kingdom tribes. That's who it's established between. And Yahshua's blood is the blood of that new covenant. Those are the many for remission of sin. But let's see, this is a little side point. This is not our teaching. We're still going to prosecute John's gospel. But we gotta lay the groundwork first. Prove all things, hold fast that which is good. So let's prove if the blood of the new covenant was just for the children of Jacob, for the remission of sins. Let's prove it. Romans chapter 11, verse 26. Again, I say, this is a little side note, but this is good. So we can see the harmony and the agreement found in the word. Romans chapter 11, verse 26. And so all Yasharals shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer. Will you highlight that if you haven't done it already? And shall turn away ungodliness from who? Jacob. For this is my covenant unto them when I shall take away their sins. Whose sins did he take away? According to Paul, whom you trust, the sins of the children of Jacob. Who was Yahshua's blood shed for? Shed in the name of his blood was the blood of what covenant? The new covenant. Who's the new covenant between? AHAYAH and the children of Jacob. You can't make this stuff up. Here, Yahshua is saying in Matthew, Yahshua is saying that his blood is the blood of the new covenant to take away the sins of many. Here, the Apostle Paul is talking about all of Yahshua being saved when a deliverer will come to Zion to take away the sins of Jacob. We know now that the many over here who the new covenant applied to were the same people that Paul talked about being saved in Romans chapter 11. How do we know they were saved? Not just didn't saved. They said their sins were done away with. Both places. Sins remitted. Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission. You can't make this up. All right, let's continue reading Matthew 26. So we're at the evening of Passover. He's gone through the Passover meal. He's introduced the concept of his body and blood being the body and blood of the new covenant. His blood and apparently explicitly being the blood of the new covenant, shed for many for remission of sins. He said this at even on Passover while he was eating Passover meal with his disciples. Let's turn over to Matthew chapter 27. Now, a whole lot of stuff happened that evening. He ate the Passover meal. He introduced the concept of the new covenant. That his blood was the blood of the new covenant. Then they came and took him. You know, it said Peter. He said when he was risen again, verse 32, Matthew 26. When he was risen again, I will go before you into Galilee, same place the angel told him to look for him. Go to Galilee. He's there in Galilee. Here he's talking about what's going to happen after he's crucified and risen again. And he goes on in Matthew 26 into the Garden of Gethsemane, praying that the cup be taken from him. And they find him there. They put the sword in his place, and they take a sword and shall perish with sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot now pray unto my Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? That's verse 53. So he's talking to the people when they came to grab him. Later on in Matthew 26. And the high priest rose, 62. And the high priest arose and said unto him, Answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witnesses against thee? But Yahshua held his peace. And the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure thee by the living Elohim that thou tell us whether thou be Messiah, son of Elohim. Yahshua said unto him, Thou hast said, nevertheless I say unto you, hereafter ye shall see the Son of Adam sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, You have spoken blasphemy. Which further need be we witnesses? Behold, now you have heard his blasphemy. So all this happened the evening of Passover. So how do we know that? Matthew chapter 27, verse 1. When the morning was come, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Yahshua to put him to death. What happened on the evening of Passover? So important to remember. Days begin at evening and they go to the following evening. So that evening, they ate Passover. He introduces the new covenant. Though his blood being the blood of the new covenant, introduces that. He gets taken. He goes to the garden praying. They find him in the garden praying. He told them that Judas is going to be the one that betrayed him. That took place. Peter attacks the guard with his sword. He said, look, if you're going to live by the sword, you'll die by the sword. All that took place at that same evening. He's questioned by the chief priest that same evening. When morning was come, the chief priest took counsel on how they're going to kill him. Let's see what else happened. Matthew 27, verse 2. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. This is all on Passover. Remember, days go from evening to evening. Now we're in the morning time of Passover. Get out of your Greek and Roman mind for a little while. The evening was the beginning of the day. The day of Passover began at even to the following even. We're still on Passover. It's so important that you remember this. It's so important you understand this. When we go to John's gospel, you're going to see it's all messed up. We're still in the same day. Now he's going to Pilate the same day. He's on Passover. He's already eaten the Passover meal, which got to be eaten in the evening. Not in the morning, in the evening. And evening precedes morning. Not the other way around. So when we look at it from the scriptural standpoint, we got to keep these things in their proper context and understanding, children. Or we'll get it all mixed up. Matthew 27, verse 1. When the morning was come, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Yahshua to put him to death. And when they had bound him and led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate the governor, then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, What is that to us? See thou to that. And he cast down the piece of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. And the chief priest took the silver piece and said, It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, because it is the price of blood. And they took counsel and brought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. Therefore, that field was called the field of blood until this day. Then it was fulfilled which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they of the children of Yasharel did value. Always happens during these broadcasts, doesn't it? That some Yahoo spammer will call. Ignore it, children, because I am.
Call from unavailable.
And when they had when he was accused of the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. Please remember that this all happened on Passover. Judas went in to throw down the silver. All this stuff happens on Passover. Let's go over to Matthew chapter 27, verse 22. And Pilate said unto them, What shall I do with Yahshua, which is called Messiah? And they said unto him, Let him be crucified. And the governor said, Why? What evil has he done? But they cried out the more, saying, Let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could not prevail nothing, but the rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. Then answered all the people and said, His blood be upon us and upon our children. Will you highlight that? Yahshua's blood, they didn't know what they were saying. Yahshua's blood be applied upon them and their children. All praises. Because Yahshua's blood is the what? The blood of the new covenant. And the new covenant is made between whom? AHAYAH and the children of Jacob. The same people who cried out for his blood be upon them. I digress. Matthew 27:26. Then released he Barabbas, or the son of the Father, or Jesus, unto them. And when he had scourged Yahshua, he delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Yahshua into the common hall and gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers. And they stripped him and put up him a scarlet robe. And when he had planted a crown of thorns, they put upon his head and a reed in his hand, and they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spit upon him and took the reed and smote him in the head. And after they had mocked him, they took the robe off him and put on his own raiment on him and led him away to crucify him. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. And when they had come into the place called Golgotha, that is to say, the place of the skull, they gave him vinegar to drink, mingled with gall. And when he had tasted thereof, he would not drink. And they crucified him, and parted his garment, cast lots, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture they did cast lots. And sitting down, they watched him there, and set over his head his accusation written, This is Yahshua, King of the Jews. And when the two thieves crucified with him, one on his right hand, the other on his left, and they passed by reviling him, wagging their heads, and saying, Thou that destroyest the temple and buildeth it in 3 days, save thyself, if thou, the son of AHAYAH, come down from the cross. Likewise, also the chief priests mocking him with the scribes and elders, said, He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the king of Yahshua, let him come down from the cross, and we will believe him. Here's the first mention. I never saw this until now. Here's the first mention. That not only was he called the King of the Jews, but he was referred to as King of Yahshua. Will you highlight that? Highlight that. He trusted in AHAYAH. Let him deliver him now. If he have him, for he said, I am the son of AHAYAH. I'll skip over to verse 46. And about the 9th hour, Yahshua cried with a loud voice and said, Ali, Ali, lama samatani. That is to say, my Yahshua, why have you forsaken me? Some of them that stood there, when they heard that, said, This man called to Elias. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave him drink. The rest said, Let us see whether Elias will come and save him. Yahshua then cried with a loud voice and yielded up the ghost. What hour was it? About the 9th hour of the day, of the morning, when he was, same day of Passover. The sun ain't set yet. So he had the Passover meal at even. He went to the Garden of Gethsemane. All this was done in a 24-hour period. Stood before Pilate, was scourged, was crucified, all within a 24-hour period. Wow, what a day. How do we know? Still within a 24-hour period. Let's see. And when the evening come, verse 57 of Matthew 27, it says, When the evening was come, there came a rich man of Arimathea named Joseph, who also himself was Yahshua's disciple. He went to Pilate and begged for the body of Yahshua. Then Pilate commanded that the body be delivered. And when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulchre and departed. And there was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary sitting over against the sepulchre. Now the next day, that followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that the deceiver said while he was yet alive, after 3 days I will rise again. So, at evening, Joseph came and begged for the body and put it in his own tomb. At evening. Evening when? Evening the day of Passover. So he was crucified on Passover. Let's see what John's gospel says. A whole lot happened, man. Let's start reading in John chapter 18. John chapter 18, verse 1. When Yahshua had spoken these words, what words? The whole prayer found in John chapter 17. Those words. When Yahshua had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over the brook Cerdon, where was a garden, into which he entered, and his disciples. And Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Yahshua oftentimes resorted thither with his disciples. Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, come hither with lanterns and torches and weapons. Yahshua therefore, knowing all things that should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, Whom seek ye? And they answered, Yahshua of Nazareth. Yahshua said unto them, I am he. And Judas, which betrayed him, stood with them. And as soon as he had said unto them, I am he, they went backwards and fell to the ground. Then asked he them again, Whom ye seek? And they said, Yahshua of Nazareth. Yahshua answered, I have told you that I am he, therefore ye seek me. Let these go their way, that they saying might be fulfilled, which he spake, of them which thou gave me, I have lost none. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and smote the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Then said Yahshua unto Peter, Put up thy sword into thy sheath. The cup which my Father has given me, I shall not drink it. Shall I not drink it? Then the band and the captain, the officers of the Jews, took Yahshua and bound him, and led him away to Annas first, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, which was the high priest the same year. Now Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. Then Simon Peter followed Yahshua. So did the other disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest and went in with Yahshua into the palace of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door without, and then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spake unto her that kept the door, and brought in Peter. Then said the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, Art thou not also one of this man's disciples? He said, I am not. And the servant and the officer stood there, who was made a fire of coal, who had made a fire of coals, for it was cold. And when they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them and warmed himself, the high priest then asked Yahshua of his disciples and his doctrine. We're going to resume there. We're going to resume here in a moment, but we need to lay the groundwork. Just a brief mention of him going to the garden, where he often go to refresh himself. We know from Matthew's gospel that was the Garden of Gethsemane. We know in Matthew's gospel from the garden time, where the soldiers came and found him, where you had this interaction between Peter and the guard, which is mentioned both in Matthew and in John's gospel. We know that it was there that Yahshua, he had just left the Passover meal, which began that evening. This was all on the 24-hour period of Passover, that he was arrested and he was tried and crucified and was taken and buried before the day ended. But no mention at all. If you read John 17, John 16, John 15, no mention at all of the Passover or the or communion or the new covenant. None. And it's not just mentioned in Matthew's gospel. It's also mentioned in Luke's gospel. And it's also mentioned in Mark's gospel. Not John's. Why not, John? What you got against the new covenant, John? I don't know. I'm sure if you were John the apostle, who is mentioned numerous times in the other gospels, if you were that John, the new covenant applied to you. But if you're not that John, if you're some other person who new covenant doesn't apply to, it kind of makes sense you don't mention it. But I digress. That's just supposition. I can't prove that either way. That's just supposition. I just found that interesting. And so we continue on. But here's the key thought. We have Peter denying himself. Let's keep reading in John 18:28. Then led they Yasha from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early. And they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. If they lead him to the judgment hall when it was early, and that Passover starts that evening, if they're going to eat the Passover, and he wasn't led to Pilate until the morning in Matthew's gospel, here, these people, these Jews in John's gospel, they haven't even eaten Passover yet. It was still daytime. I'll read it again. John 18:28. Like I said, this is key. And then led they Yasha from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early. And they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring you against this man? They answered and said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up unto thee. Then said Pilate unto them, Take ye him and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put a man to death, that the saying of Yasha might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. I don't know what saying John's talking about, but let's continue. Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again and called Yasha and said unto him, Art thou the king of the Jews? Yasha answered, answered him, Sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it to thee of me? Then Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Thy own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What have you done? Yasha answered, My kingdom is not of this world. And my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. Wait a minute, I thought he was the king of the Jews. What is he talking about? This Yasha character in John's gospel, he seems like he don't even know what a Jew is. He's talking about he shouldn't be delivered unto the Jews. But I thought he was a Jew. You see how John's gospel just don't make sense when you actually read it in light of the other gospels? The same events, just told with a whole different bend to them. And John 18:28 is key. They haven't even eaten the Passover yet. But in Matthew, Passover, they had ate the meal. It was the day. They ate it in the evening, and sun was up now. Passover wasn't meant to be eaten then, but it was still past the day of Passover. That didn't end until evening time. But here, it was the prep day before Passover. They haven't even eaten it yet. And he's being judged. Let's see. Let's continue to read. Let's read verse 36 again. John 18:36. And bear with me, children. I know this is a little rough, and we reading a lot of scriptures, and we're bouncing back and forth between thoughts. I know how it is, but these things need to be deconstructed carefully. We need to read carefully and thoroughly so we can deconstruct what's being said here in light of what was said in the other gospels. We're looking for 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. Remember that. That's always key. And if there's a word that cannot be established by independent other witnesses, that word should be looked at thoroughly for its authenticity. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at the authenticity of these things. Verse 36 again, John 18:36. Yahshua answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. Pilate therefore said unto him, art thou a king then? Yahshua answered, thou sayest that I am a king. To this end I was born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness of the truth, unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth hears my voice. Where's that at? Besides John's gospel? Nowhere. But I digress. Pilate said unto him, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said unto them, I find no fault. I find in him no fault at all. But ye have a custom that I should release unto you one at the Passover. Will you therefore that I release unto you the King of the Jews? And they cried, and they all again saying, not this man, but Barabbas, but Jesus. Now Jesus was a robber. He ain't lying. He stole Yahshua's identity. But I'll leave it at that. I'll leave that alone for now. Now Barabbas was a robber. John chapter 19, verse 1. Then Pilate therefore took Yahshua and scourged him. And the soldiers planted a crown of thorns and put on his head and put on him a purple robe and said, Hail, King of the Jews! And they smote him with their hand. Pilate therefore went forth again and said to him, Behold, I bring him forth unto you, that you may know that I find no fault in him. Then came Yahshua forth, wearing a crown of thorns and a purple robe, and Pilate said unto them, Behold the man. Wait a minute. Back in Matthew's gospel, they put a robe on and took it off, put his own raiment back on. Which is it? Which is it? They put the robe on, the soldiers did, back in Matthew's gospel. They put the robe on him, put a crown on his head, made fun of him, hit him, then took the robe off and put his own clothes back on. Some of you missed that. Let's go back. Matthew 27, verse 27. Then the soldiers of the governor took Yahshua into the common hall and gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers. And they stripped him and put on him a scarlet robe. And when they had planted a crown of thorns, they put it upon his head, and a reed in his right hand, and bowed the knee before him, and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spit upon him, and took the reed, and smote him on the head. And after they had mocked him, they took the robe off from him, and put on his own raiment, and led him away to crucify him. Well, let's go over here to John's gospel. John chapter 19, verse 1. Then Pilate therefore took Yahshua and scourged him. And the soldiers planted a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe, and said, Hail, King of the Jews! And they smote him with their hands. Now, it didn't say they hit him with his hands. In Matthew's God said hit him with the reed they put in his hand. But that's a small point. We'll just let it go. Pilate therefore went forth again and said unto him, Behold, I bring him forth to you, that ye might know that I find no fault in him. Then came Yahshua forth, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. What? Like I said, out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. What? It said they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes back and took him to be crucified. Here, it says, well, Brother Holly, some of you defenders of John's Gospel are about to say, well, Brother Holly, see, Matthew didn't know about this part. Really? Really? Okay. Let's see Luke talk about it. Hmm. 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 Luke chapter 23, verse 11. It said it was Herod to put the robe on him. And Herod, with his men of war, set him at naught, with his soldiers, set him at naught, and mocked him, and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him again to Pilate. And the same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together, and for before they were at enmity between themselves. And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people, said unto them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverted the people. And behold, I have examined him before you, and found no fault in this man touching those things where he is accused. No, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. I will therefore chasten him and release him, for of necessity he must release one of them at the feast. And they cried out at once, saying, Away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas, or the son of the father, who was a certain sedition made in the city, and for murder was cast into prison. Pilate, therefore, willing to release Yahshua, spake again to them. But they cried, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. And he said unto them the third time, Why? What evil has he done? I found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chasten him and let him go. And they were instant with a loud voice, requiring that he might be crucified. And the voice of them and of the chief priests prevailed. And Pilate gave sentence that he should be as they required. And he released unto them, I'm reading from Luke chapter 23, verse 23, and they were instant with a loud voice, requiring that he might be crucified. And with the voice of them and of the chief priests prevailed. And Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. And he released unto them him that for sedition and murder was cast into prison, Barabbas, whom they had desired, but he delivered Yahshua to their will. And as they led him away, they laid hold upon him Simon, a Cyrene, coming out of the country, and unto him they laid the cross, they might bear it. So the same day he was crucified. Back to John's Gospel. John 19:11. Oh, John 19:10. It says, Then Pilate said unto him, Speak thou not unto me, knowing thou not that I have power to crucify thee, and I have power to release thee? Yahshua answered, Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he hath delivered me unto thee that have the greater sin. And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Yahshua forth and sat down in the judgment seat in the place that is called the pavement, but in Hebrew, Golgotha. And it was the preparation of the Passover. Will you highlight that? See, it's twice. It's twice they messed it up in John's gospel. What did they say the first time? Concerning the Passover, concerning these events? I'm highlighting it myself. This is John 19:14. And it was the preparation of the Passover about the 6th hour. He said unto the Jews, Behold your king. It was the preparation of the Passover. But in Matthew's gospel, it said he was crucified on the Passover. Same day of the Passover. They hadn't even eaten the Passover in John's gospel. They already crucified. So what day was Messiah crucified on? Was it the day of preparation of Passover, or was it Passover? Which? The scripture says he was crucified on Passover. The Apostle Paul, whom we trust, said that Yahshua is the Passover lamb sacrificed for us. He is our Passover. I read John 19:14 again. And it was the preparation of the Passover. Highlight, stars. And about the 6th hour, he said unto the Jews, Behold your king. And they cried, Away with him, crucify him. Pilate said unto them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. Then delivered he him therefore unto them to be crucified. The 6th hour, right? But he was on the cross the 3rd hour. In Matthew's gospel, here the 6th hour, he ain't been crucified yet. On the wrong day at the wrong hour. But I just heard that scripture in my head. No one knows the day of the hour. The writer of John sure didn't know the day of the hour. He had no idea what's going on. I just couldn't resist. I'm sorry. Then delivered he them therefore to be crucified, and they took Yahshua and led him away. And he bearing his cross went forth until a place called the place of the skull, which is in the Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him, and 2 others with him, one on either side, and Yahshua in the midst. And Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was, Yahshua of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Now this was, according to John's gospel, it was the preparation of the Passover, about the 6th hour. And he said unto, Behold your king. Way back here in Matthew's gospel. That he ate the Passover. Matthew chapter 26. Says, verse 17, Now on the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Yahshua, saying unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover? It's preparation day, right? Prepare to eat the Passover. His disciples talking to him on that day to prepare to eat the Passover. And he sat down and ate the Passover with them. We can read that in Matthew 26, verse 20. Now when the evening was come, he sat down with the 12. And as they did eat, so Master Yahshua ate the Passover with his disciples. Here in John's gospel, it was the preparation of the Passover about the 6th hour. And he said unto the Jews, this is Pilate speaking, Behold your king. But they cried, Away with him. Whoa. He was crucified the day before the Passover. Remember, back in Leviticus, the days for feasts and Sabbaths starts at even to even. We read that, right? From evening to evening. When it was evening, the Passover began. They said, sit down and eat. Matthew's gospel. John's gospel is the day of preparation, the day before the Passover meal. He's being crucified. Which is it? No mention of the Passover meal in John's gospel. You know why? Because he was crucified before. That's a good reason for it being omitted. Because according to John's gospel, he was crucified the day before. Not according to Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I'm sorry. Not Matthew, Mark, and Luke. He ate the Passover meal. He lifted up the cup saying, this is the blood of the new covenant. Not according to John or whoever wrote John's gospel. No Passover meal celebrated. He was crucified the day prior. Wow. So I know it took a long time in this to get to the point. But there it is in black and white. The first in a series of what's wrong with John's gospel. The first thing wrong with it is it doesn't contain any mention of the new covenant, and it crucifies the Messiah on the wrong day. All praise to the Most High, AHAYAH, and to his son, Yeshua, the Messiah. Hallelujah.